We are less than 1 week away from Election Day in the Georgia Senate runoff races. But according to the Elections Project, more than 2.5 million votes have already been cast. The two races will decide which party controls the Senate in January. President-elect Joe Biden plans to travel to Georgia on Monday to campaign for the two Democratic candidates, Reverend Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. And President Trump is also holding a rally Monday to show support for the incumbent Republican senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. For more on this, I want to bring in Tia Mitchell. She's a Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Tell us what we've seen so far from early voting.
Well, of course, we have both in-person early voting and mail-in voting by absentee ballot, whether they drop it off in a drop box or put it in the mailbox. Yesterday was turnout has increased. You know, there was a drop-off because of Christmas and locations being closed. Today is the final day of in-person early voting in some counties, and then other counties are ending tomorrow. So we have seen those increases in longer lines at some of those early voting locations as people try to go ahead and get their votes in now as opposed to waiting until Election Day on Tuesday.
You have been reporting, of course, that Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue backed President Trump's push to increase stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000. What can you tell us about that, and do you have a sense of what effect that is having on this election?
So Loeffler and Perdue, their Democratic opponents, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, were really using that as a campaign issue ahead of their decision. You know, when President Trump started talking about increasing the stimulus to $2,000, those Democrats were saying, Loeffler and Perdue support Trump on everything else. Why won't they support Trump in increasing the stimulus for Americans? And so when Loeffler and Perdue did come out in favor of those checks, you know, I think it was a way for them to counter those attacks coming from the Democrats. But then Democrats said, wait a minute. It's one thing to say you support the checks. It's another thing for you to lobby and push Mitch McConnell to actually bringing that to a vote on the Senate floor. Because right now that has not happened, and it may not happen at all, which allows Loeffler and Perdue kind of to avoid making a vote that, you know, can be criticized by fiscal conservatives, but also appeasing those who want them to support the higher stimulus checks.
Right. President Trump and President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are all planning to campaign in Georgia in the final few days before the contest. What impact do you think their presence will have there? And do you think this is a matter of trying to change minds, or just it's all about turnout?
It's all about turnout. And I think that's why, you know, these heavy hitters are showing up to make that final push before Election Day, particularly for the Republican side. We know that there has been a lot of criticism of absentee balloting. And so Republicans are increasingly going back to voting on Election Day, which will be Tuesday. And so you'll have Trump in Georgia, in Northwest Georgia, which is ruby red, the day before the election to try to drum up turnout. And then again, you've got Vice President-elect Harris going to Savannah, which is like the second largest population center, the second largest city in Georgia. And then we don't yet know where President-elect Biden will be coming, but it's probably safe to say somewhere in the metro Atlanta area. And again, it'll be about drumming up voter enthusiasm to try to make sure that folks who hadn't voted by that time get their ballots in on Election Day.
As you very well know, in November, we did not know the outcome of the election for days. Do you think we're going to see that same thing happen again? And when could we know which party will control the Senate?
It's quite likely that in Georgia, it's going to take several days, particularly if, as we expect, the races are close. We have to remember that Georgia is one of those states that does not allow election officials to count absentee ballots until after the polls close at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. And we know there will be hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots to be counted then. Now, again, they will be processed and the signatures verified and things like that ahead of time, but the actual counting of absentee ballots will still take some time. And so if those absentee ballots are enough votes to switch the outcome of the race after Election Day, then we're going to have to wait, probably a couple of days to get all that counting done.
And do you think we might see a repeat of what happened with the presidential election, where the in-person votes, which is mostly Republicans, come in first, and then the absentee ballots are counted, and the Democrats come from behind and maybe pull ahead, and then President Trump starts saying it's a fraudulent election? Do you think we could see a repeat of that entire scenario?
We can see a repeat of that entire scenario, including lawsuits and challenges that in Georgia are still ongoing from the general election. So there could be a whole nother round of that after the runoffs. Again, as you noted, those absentee ballots are going to come in later, and they can switch the outcome of the race. We expect Democrats to have an edge from the mail-in balloting because Republicans have been discouraging members of their party from using that method of voting. And of course, that doesn't mean there's fraud. It doesn't mean the election is rigged. It just means it's going to take time to have an accurate count of all ballots that have been cast. But yes, it won't just be Trump this time. It'll be Loeffler and Perdue and their supporters possibly questioning the integrity of the election process.
Well, Tia, enjoy those 14, 16, and 18-hour days in the weeks to come. So,
I'm trying.
And good, you're doing great work. Thank you.